Bring all the food and serve my son. Yes, Dad, this is amazing. Enjoy it.
Ikechukwu, a valiant man, was married to Anita. Anita was the wife of his youth. He loved and cherished her so much. But unfortunately, Ikechukwu and Anita had to wait for years before they welcomed a child of their own. In those years, while they trusted on God for the fruit of the womb, Ikechukwu focused his energy on his career, and he sure did make it through. He was blessed all around. He had workers who he made family. Oh yes, Ikechukwu was generous and friendly. He had an act of bringing people close to himself. Well, fate finally remembered Ikechukwu and Anita. Anita conceived and bore a baby girl. Ikechukwu was not happy his wife had given birth to a baby girl. I have worked so hard for a woman who will get married to another man and bear his name to be my first fruit. Ikechukwu had thought to himself. Not for once did Ikechukwu look at his baby girl. He still loved his wife, but loving his daughter was not part of it. Anita hoped Ikechukwu will look at his daughter one day and love her too. Ikechukwu named her Mallory, meaning ill fortune. He considered her as an ill fortune, hence the name he gave her. Mallory grew up without her father's love. Anita tried all she could to be there for Mallory as much as she could, but it could not be like having one's both parents present. Ikechukwu and Anita tried having another baby, and this time around, without so much delay, Anita took in, and again she gave birth to a baby girl. Ikechukwu was as displeased as he was when Mallory was born. He was more disappointed because he had high hopes the baby was going to be a boy. Time is going. I need an heir for my businesses. I can't depend on ladies who will bear another man's name later in the future, he said angrily to the doctor when he was told Anita had given birth to a baby girl. Ikechukwu named his second daughter Mara, meaning bitterness. He said, "For I was bitter on hearing my second fruit was a girl." Anita was sad. Not sad that she had given birth to a girl, but sad that Mara would also grow without the love of her father. Ikechukwu avoided Mara and Mallory as much as he could. Anita lived hoping one day Ikechukwu will look upon his daughters with love and affection. But will that day ever come? Ikechukwu's businesses kept growing, and he grew in wealth. He treated Anita so special whenever he could, and spent lavishly on her. One day, Ikechukwu and Anita were going out as usual, and Anita summoned courage to talk to her husband about taking the kids out. "Babe, you've not spoken about taking the girls out," Anita said. "Which girls?" Ikechukwu asked, pretending to be oblivious of what she was talking about. "Our girls, Mallory and Mara." "Can we not talk about that now?" "Babe, how long do you want to treat them this way? They need their father. They need you in their lives." "Are we still going out or not?" Ikechukwu asked, not interested in the conversation. Years passed, and Ikechukwu did not change a bit. He treated his daughters with disgust as he did ever since they were born. Anita tried convincing again, and this time around, she gave birth to a baby boy. Ikechukwu was so happy. He organized a feast to welcome his son. Mallory, who was 5 years, and Mara, 3 years, saw how happy their father was. Never was he as happy as that about them. "And his name shall be called Obinna," meaning father's pride, "for he is dear to me and represents my legacy," Ikechukwu had said proudly at the feast. Time passed and nothing in the house truly changed. Ikechukwu's affection remained fixed on his son like the sun that refused to shift its position in the sky. Mallory and Mara grew taller, quieter and stronger in ways no one praised. Their dresses were replaced only when they were too worn to mend. Their achievements unnoticed. Their laughter softer than it had once been. Obinna, however, grew under the full weight of his father's pride. When the day finally came for him to leave for higher institution, the entire compound seemed to breathe around the single moment. Ikechukwu stood straighter than usual, chest lifted, voice louder than it had ever been. "My son, he said, gripping Obinna's shoulder firmly. You carry my legacy. Go and make me proud. Obinna nodded respectfully. I will, Dad. Mallory and Mara stood a little distance away, watching. They did not expect their father to ask about their own schooling, their own dreams. They had long stopped expecting anything. But before Obinna stepped into the waiting vehicle, he turned back. He walked straight to his sisters. Mallory looked surprised when he pulled her into a brief, awkward hug. Mallory blinked, confused, when he gently tapped her head the way their father usually do to only him. I will come back, he said quietly, and when I do, we will sit together like before. Mallory forced a smile, but her eyes shone with something deeper, hope mixed with disbelief. Obinna studied hard. He excelled. His name was called among the best graduates in his class. Ikechukwu's pride grew louder with each report that came home. He told anyone who cared to listen that his child was exceptional, that his investments had not been wasted. When Obinna returned after graduation, his father wasted no time. He took him straight into his business. This will be yours one day, the man said, gesturing widely at the office and the workers moving around. Obinna listened respectfully, learning quickly, asking questions, understanding the system his father had built over decades. Yet, for all the time he spent at the office, he never forgot the two figures who once sat on the floor sharing a small bowl of porridge. One evening, instead of going straight home from work with his father, Obinna stopped at the market. He bought two neatly folded dresses. Not expensive like the suits his father bought him, but new, clean, and beautiful. When he got home, he didn't call his father first. He called, Mallory, Mara. The girls, no, the young women now, stepped out consciously. Mallory had learned to carry herself with quiet dignity. Mara still had softness in her eyes, but years of neglect had taught her restraint. Obinna held out the packages. These are for you. They both froze. For us? Mara asked, almost whispering. Yes, he said simply. Mallory hesitated before taking the dress, as though it might be taken back if she moved too quickly. No one has ever, she stopped herself. Obinna smiled quietly. You are my sisters. It was such a simple statement, yet it landed heavier than any speech their father had ever given. From that day forward, Obinna began to draw them closer into his life. He asked about their interests. He listened when they spoke. He noticed when they were silent. When he ate, he called them to sit at the same table. At first, they sit stiffly, unsure if they were truly allowed to be there. Years of exclusion had built invisible walls around them. Ikechukwu watched this new pattern with mild irritation. Why do you keep calling them? He asked one evening. Obinna met his gaze calmly. They are my family. The man said nothing more, but the air shifted slightly. Obinna did more than just include them at meals. He began encouraging Mallory to continue her education. He helped Mara learn skills she had always wanted but never had the chance to pursue. He spoke to them as equals, not as burdens. Slowly, the house began to sound different. There was more laughter, more conversation, and more life. Mallory, who once whispered her wishes into the dark, now found herself speaking openly across the table. Mara, who once asked if her father would miss her if she disappeared, now smiled more easily. Their father still struggled with old beliefs, still held tightly to the idea that his son was his greatest achievement. But something he never expected began to unfold right before him. The daughters he had ignored did not grow bitter towards their brother. They loved him, and the son he raised to carry his name carried something else as well: compassion. One evening, as Obinna sat between his sisters, listening to them argue playfully over something small, their laughter filling the room. The father paused at the doorway. For the first time in many years, he did not see burdens. He saw his children, all three of them, and though he said nothing, something unfamiliar stirred quietly in his chest. A realization that legacy was not only the name a child carried, but the love they chose to give each other. Obinna had inherited his father's business, but he had also begun to rebuild what his father had neglected, the broken pieces between them. As months passed, the bond between Obinna, Mallory, and Mara grew stronger in quite steady ways. What had once been distance filled with silence slowly turned into compassion filled with warmth. One Sunday morning, before the sun had fully risen, Obinna knocked gently on his sister's door. Mallory, Mara, are you awake? Mara opened the door, surprised. Yes, is everything alright? Obinna smiled. Get dressed, we are going to church. The girls exchanged a quick look. Their father had never insisted they go with him. They never gathered them together for worship. Church had always felt like something they attended quietly, separately, and almost invisible. Mara hesitated. Just us? Yes, Obinna said gently. Just us. That morning, they walked side by side down the road. The air was cool. The town slowly waking. For the first time in many years, Mallory did not feel like she had to walk behind anyone. Mara did not feel unseen. They entered the church together and sat on the same bench. When the worship began, the voices around them rose in song. Obinna lifted his hand slightly, eyes closed in reverence. Mallory watched him at first, unsure. Then Mara began to sing softly. The words of the hymn filled the space between them. Words about a father whose love did not measure worth by gender or name. Slowly, Mallory joined. Before long, the three of them were singing together, their voices blending, not perfect, but sincere. During prayer, Obinna spoke quietly. Lord, I thank you for my sisters. Thank you for keeping us together. Mallory felt tears gathered in her eyes. No one had ever thanked God for her presence before. Mara reached for her hand. They stayed after the service, talking, laughing, and sharing small stories. It was simple, but it felt like something sacred had been restored. Not just faith, but belonging. From then on, Sunday became theirs. Every week, the three of them went together. They prayed together. They shared meals afterwards. They began to build memories that did not carry the weight of neglect. At first, their father paid little attention, but one Sunday morning, as he prepared to leave the house, he noticed something different. He stepped outside and saw them. Obinna walking between Mallory and Mara, all three dressed neatly, speaking freely, not forced, not distant. Something inside him tightened. Where are you going? He asked. To church. Obinna replied respectfully. With them? His father asked. Yes. There was no difference in his words, only certainty. The man watched them leave. That day, he arrived at church later than usual. As he stepped inside, his eyes searched instinctively for his son. Instead, he saw all three of his children seated together. Mallory was smiling as Mara whispered something that made Obinna laugh quietly. They looked whole, not like burdens, not like strangers. His chest felt strangely heavy. For the first time, he sat behind them instead of apart. When the congregation stood to worship, he heard his daughter's voice clearly, and something inside him cracked. He remembered the years he had ignored them, the question he never answered, the love he had withheld. By the end of the service, his eyes were moist, though he quickly wiped them. Outside, as the three of them walked ahead, he softly called, Mallory. She froze. Slowly, she turned. It had been years since he had called her name like that. Yes, Dad. His voice was not as firm as it once was. You sang well. Mallory's throat tightened. Thank you, sir. Then he looked at Mara. You too. It was small, but it was the first step. From that day forward, change did not happen in loud declaration. It came in a quiet actions. He began sitting with them during meals. He started asking simple questions. How was your day? Are you well? At first, the girls answered consciously, but Obinna remained steady, bridging every gap with patience. Anita noticed the changes and was happy. With time, the house that once held silence now held conversation. Ikechukwu slowly released the belief that love invested in daughters was wasted. He began to see their strengths, their kindness, their loyalty. Years passed. People would often see the family working together, father, mother, and all three children, on their way to church, not divided, not distant, but together. The man who once believed only his son carried his legacy eventually learned that love, when given freely, multiplies across every child. Mallory and Mara no longer went to sleep wondering if they were wanted. Obinna did more than inherit his father's name. He restored his family. And in time, the home that once carried quiet pain became a place filled with peace, acceptance, and a happiness that grew stronger with each passing day. In the end, their home became a living testimony that God's love can heal even the deepest wounds. What was once broken by neglect was restored through patience, forgiveness, and grace. Ikechukwu learned that every child is a gift from God, not a burden, and that true legacy is not carried by one's name alone, but by love shared among all. For where God is allowed to enter, hearts are softened, families are restored, and joy replaces sorrow. And so they lived, not as divided pieces, but as one family, working together in love, under the covering of God's mercy.